there were ever an example of every vote counts, we are watching that right now. Recounts are complete. And as we stand today, the two Democrats running to be South Florida's next member of Congress are two votes apart.
Wow. Congressional candidates Dale Holness and Sheila Shirflis McCormick were there on Friday watching as the Broward Canvassing Board certified the recounts. All that is left now to count are the overseas and military votes. They are due by 5 o'clock Friday afternoon.
Joe Scott is Broward's Supervisor of Elections with us today after a dramatic and busy week. Joe, great to see you. Thanks so much for being with us. You got an extra hour of sleep, though.
Yeah. Hey, good morning, Glenn and Michael. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Joe. Glennon was in your office Thursday. I was there on Friday, and I have to say, I was impressed by the efficiency, the speed with which you and your staff work. You run right through the recounts manually and the machine recounts. Have you ever seen an election this close?
I don't believe we've had one in Broward County this close in quite a while. So certainly not on my watch, since this is probably the first really big election that I've managed as supervisor.
Right, and when you were elected, just at the beginning of this year, right? Has it been a year yet?
It has, yes.
My time is going by so quickly. So you had said you were going to put in some changes. You know, the Broward Supervisor of Elections office has gone through a decade or so of drama. So you put in some changes, not expecting this kind of recount, but what kind of changes did you have in place for this, and did they work?
Well, absolutely. So we've actually done a number of things in the first few months that were really about increasing accessibility and making it easier for people to vote. We opened up several satellite or branch offices across the county, and we had a lot more drop boxes available for folks to drop off their ballots for this special election, whereas normally the last 2 days, there would only be 2 locations you could go to. For this special election, we actually had 5 locations just for this small special election that people could go and drop off their ballots during the last 48 hours of the race.
Yeah, Joe, you know, I would like to emphasize for our viewers how scrupulous you and the canvassing board were on Friday as the board, and you are a member of the board, yes, examined ballots that had been rejected earlier because of signature discrepancies. You had 5 were represented to be considered, and you recommended the 2 be accepted because the time lapse between the original voter registration signature and the vote on Tuesday, or the vote by mail ballots, had just been a long time, 26 years in one case.
Yeah, so the counsel for one of the candidates did ask us if they could just have another public viewing where we lay out all the ballots that we had just rejected, so they could take a look and sort of come up with some. And the council did come up with some compelling arguments, and that led us to say, okay, let us look back and see if we can find more information to see if we can validate that these voters are in fact the ones who signed the envelopes. And when we did find that new evidence, we found some new information, and we brought that to bear. It did cause us to say, okay, at this point, maybe there are a couple of these that we need to bring back in, especially with it being such a close race. The last thing we want to do is disenfranchise anyone when every single vote is going to count here.
So you did, and the canvassing board did, reject a ballot that came in unsigned. In fact, it was such a moment. I put it up on my Twitter feed on Thursday. Some research showed that the ballot was from someone who had been deceased. So you want to take a look at this for just a moment? Is there sound here? Rejection. So there's that ballot, unsigned, never opened, rejected because you learned that the voter was deceased. But why not go further to find out whether this was just a mistake or potential fraud? Wouldn't that be something that the office would want to know and follow up on?
No, so this is an example of the system working exactly the way that it is supposed to. We have some, in some cases, we actually had some where the people are returning the ballot to us and letting us know that the person is deceased. And because they're returning the ballot and letting us know the person is deceased, it is something that there isn't actually an automatic procedure for, so it needs to come before the canvassing board. But this, again, is just a great example of the system working exactly the way that it was supposed to.
Yeah, Joe, you reported to us that several hundred ballots arrived there at election headquarters after 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and therefore they did not count. Now, you had a problem with the United States Postal Service. You went to the Opelika station. You tried to get some information to make sure you were getting all the ballots. Did they not cooperate with you?
Yeah, that is correct. So, I feel like as an elections official, it's very important that I do everything that I can to make sure that we're getting all the ballots back to our facility and that we get every vote counted. As part of that, I've had a close relationship. I've continuously communicated with people at the Postal Service. When I showed up there, I think I had a simple request that I actually wanted to go inside and kind of take a look at how they were handling all the ballots and getting them through the system, and they refused to allow me in. I found the lack of transparency very disturbing, and I think this is something that needs to really be addressed. That elections officials need to have access to those facilities so that we can provide a little bit of oversight and make sure that our ballots are making it to us on time.
And voters need to look at that and consider that too when they're deciding to vote by mail and really make allowances for that time frame. You said something before about the extra drop boxes and the extra hours that you had put in. This is really the first election under the state's new election law that's being challenged in court right now. How did the new rules, stricter ID requirements, limited hours, and some stricter security on drop boxes, how did that affect this vote? Did you see positive effects, any negative effects? What did you see?
So we put forth a lot more effort to make sure that people had a lot of different options to where they could drop off their vote by mail ballots. So more options than they had before, but fewer hours. So I believe that overall, we ended up seeing more participation by vote by mail. We actually saw a much bigger, overall, a huge number of the vote actually came in by mail. So vote by mail is something that is very important to the electorate at this point. And, we did everything that we could to try to make it work. And because of that, I think we didn't have a big drop off.
Joe, we saw this week that Governor DeSantis announced that he wants to create a sort of an elections enforcement office where people who are sworn law enforcement officers are going to look around the state for instances of election fraud. Frankly, in your tenure, and in Miami-Dade County, we don't know of any instances of outright election fraud over the last several years. Do you know of any?
No, I don't. Other than probably the biggest elections fraud case that we are currently seeing is the one that happened in Miami, where there was a state Senate candidate who was placed in the race and funded for the sole purpose of deceiving voters. So that would be the one case of election fraud that we've really seen here.
Yeah, and may I just interrupt to say that my friend and colleague Glenna broke that story, and the former state senator Frank Hortilas is still facing a trial in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of having more law enforcement focused on election fraud, my biggest concern is that this has been politicized to such a degree that there's really a genuine concern that the focus would be disproportionate on communities that they feel like are going to more likely vote for the other side. And I just feel like our governor has been very, very partisan in his approach to how he's talked about elections and how he's approached election reform. And that just makes it very concerning, for elections officials to see that they're adding some kind of new law enforcement agency. We all want to see voter fraud prevented. We all want integrity in our elections, but we want to make sure that the enforcement is done in a fair way and that one side isn't disproportionately under the microscope, so to say.
And part of our job, like yours, is to watch that and report on it and make sure that you're right. Joe Scott, great to have you today. Thanks so much for being with us. And it's not over yet, so we'll see you this week.
Yeah, we will see you on Friday for the final results.